Aloha and welcome to Your Heart Magic, an illuminating space where psychology, spirituality and heart wisdom meet. Here's your host, Dr. BethAnne Kapansky-Wright, the clinical psychologist with a mystic mind.
Aloha, everybody. Welcome to Your Heart Magic. This is Dr. BethAnne Kapansky-Wright, and this is our last episode for 2023. Oh my goodness, we made it. And it feels celebratory to be making this today. I always feel like the end of the year is this graduation or commencement ceremony. And even though the story continues and our lives continue and it's all building off of one another, I really love the idea of taking a little bit of space to reflect before we step into the pages of a new year. And so with that, I decided that a very appropriate final episode of the year would be to do a energy roundup and talk about the overall energy of 2023 from the perspective of the Akashic Records and what is to come in 2024. So welcome to our Akashic Roundup episode today. So when we talk about the energy of 2023, I have done several episodes on Your Heart Magic throughout the year of kind of doing like a quarterly energy update or something like that. But just a refresher, in case you've forgotten or didn't tune into those, the theme for the year 2023, according to the Akashic Records, was the evolution of the light. And when I opened the records last end of December of 2022, this is when I was channeling the Akashic wisdom for this upcoming year. Something that the record said is that you will end the year in a very different place than where you started. And there was this idea that for some people, that might truly mean like a geographical relocation or some sort of change of address, change of state, maybe change of country. Could be change in relationship status, change in job, that something tangible happened in the material world, in your relationships, in the things that comprise the elements that put together your life and your path, that some big shifts were going to be happening with that for many people, not all people, for many people. And that for other people, the shifts would be very internal and they would be shifts in identity, shifts in how they might understand their relationship with themselves or their life purpose. Perhaps it shifts in spirituality, shifts in a belief system. There are so many ways that we can shift and move in our inner world and our psyche and our emotional body, and our heart wisdom. And so that for some people, it would be an inner shift that happened. And that for most people, it probably feels like a little bit of both. So a really nice reflection point to think about as you are doing your own work of kind of closing out 2023 is to just tap into a little bit of where did you start the year and where are you now? And what's different? How have you changed? How have circumstances in your life changed? If something is the same and it's feeling really stuck, then has your relationship to it changed? And have you had a change in insight or understanding or breaking a pattern or approaching something in a different way? Change is always happening around us. It's always happening within us. And it's of incredible value to sit down and look at what has shifted because I think it allows us to do some really nice inventory and kind of just take stock with ourselves and be like, where was I at? Where am I at now? And how have I grown in that time? So this is part of what the evolution of the light was about. It is the idea that we are the light, right? And that light happens in many ways. And that as part of the light, we are evolving and we are shifting. And that is manifested in the outer conditions of our lives and in the internal conditions of our inner world. At the same time, the evolution of the light was also speaking to bigger movement of light happening within the collective and happening with what we'll call more cosmic like energies. And this entire year, whenever I have tapped into the records and really tried to tap into more of what's going on in the collective, what's going on in more of a, we'll say, cosmic galactic sense, I have just felt such a sense of fluctuations, a sense of things shifting, a shift of energy changing, of renegotiating of perhaps energetic contracts or how systems are looking. And all of this has felt very big to me. I'm not even going to try and like break it down and explain what all that means. It's more like I'll have this sense of these incredible tectonic shifts happening in these multiple spheres of these various cycles that we're working within. And for the purposes of my work with the records, I tend to take it to our individual paths and kind of be like, okay, well, then what does that mean for us? For us as a human down here on this planet at this time, trying to navigate the best that we know how. I like to think that going into the Akashic records and receiving information that applies to the collective is a little bit like getting a map of a new destination. And it might not be this well mapped out thing of this is exactly where you're going to go and you're going to take a right here and here's the right way to get there. But it at least kind of shows you this is what you can expect in the terrain ahead of you, right? Like, what if you were dropped into a new territory? It might be helpful to know in advance, is that new territory going to be like forest and mountains? Do you want a backpack and hiking boots and like heavy clothing and, some, I was going to say some snacks, but I was like, oh, who are we kidding? We always want snacks, hearty snacks that last a long time, or is that new terrain tropical? And do you want to pack lighter and you're not going to have to be traversing as much? When we look at what the energy of something is, it allows us to intuitively tune into what's happening energetically in the month ahead or in the collective around us. And that can help us navigate with a little bit more peace and ease. And that is why I love doing this Akashic work and looking at some of these bigger energies for all of us. It is my way of kind of being like, okay, here's the map. And we're not going to know exactly what it looks like, but at least we can know. Here's a few things that you might want to expect. And so this year, and all of these bigger things that were evolving, there was this real sense that the light itself, the energy of light, and some of these bigger spiritual energies have also been shifting and moving with us. And we've certainly seen a lot of upheaval in our world. And even though things might not always look light on the surface, I do find spiritual comfort in always being able to use our spiritual connection to pour our hearts out to our angels and guides and God and, whatever we understand the mysteries to be, and to be a light for humanity and a voice of prayer for some of what's going on around us. And to remember that we're not alone in this, that there are good beings of light behind the scenes who are helping support humanity at this time. And then there are many, many good beings of light in human form down here on the planet. Those who are listening to this, who are bringing their own special brand of light to the earth at this time and acting in some form of a healing capacity. So, a few major themes that we have seen this year in 2023 is, first of all, a redefinition of significance and influence. And something that has come out in the records multiple times throughout the past year is that there's been a shift in the relationship for the collective of what does it mean to be significant? What does it mean to truly have influence? And that shift is for the better. It is a shift into more sincerity, into more authenticity. There was an interesting update that I did sometime back in the spring where I really looked at this specifically. And one of the things that the records talked about is that we are seeing people who might not identify as spiritual, like they would never listen to this podcast. It's not their jam. It's just not their deal to be into something like this. And yet they are very much here to be a presence for the light and perhaps are in some sort of a leadership position in a business or something in one of the bigger systems or industries that might comprise some of the bigger systems in our world, like healthcare or politics or, leadership in some shape or form. And that part of what we were seeing was sort of this call to consciousness with people and people being really tired of being sold a oceanside property in Arizona, being sold a plot of land and sort of sold this idea or this image of somebody when the reality is that it doesn't exist. Like people are wanting more transparency and are hoping to see more of that. And there was very much this feeling that part of how that was shifting and supporting us is people in many positions and many different walks of life being more of a conscious consumer or a conscious leader, being willing to examine their values a little bit more and ask more of the values of the people around them. So that shift is going to be happening for a long time. We did not get to where we're at right now in terms of what humanity has evolved into overnight. It is not going to unravel overnight. We can fully expect that some of the shaking up of systems and governments and politics and social structures and all of those things is going to be ongoing themes that we probably see throughout our lifetime. But we can know that things are shifting in a hopeful direction and that there is this growing awareness of sincerity and authenticity being seen as something valuable. And so I'm really excited to hear that. And I'm really curious to see how that continues to open things up as we move forward into 2024. Something else that was a major theme for this past year was this like huge influx in growth in spirituality and intuitive abilities. And the records themselves and a couple of the monthly messages really spoke to certain months being really focused in on spiritual awareness and growing intuition. So if you're listening to this and you have felt a newfound sense of spiritual awakening, or you feel like your intuition's growing, or you've had real spiritual experiences, something that you really feel is, kind of something that is a little bit more of the ethereal realm, the energetic realm, interacting with you and sort of intersecting with your life path. If you've had things that feel a little bit more magical or even a little bit more kind of like a mind trip where you're like, whoa, did that just happen? And if I told my friend who didn't believe in this, like they probably would tell me that I'm making it up, but like I think this is really happening. And so maybe you even consulted, a spiritual coach or some sort of psychic guide or somebody who does spiritual work. Maybe you've tuned into more podcast or read more books or kind of gotten more into that. So there's been a big influx of spiritual gifts, and that is so diverse. I'm not even going to pretend to know how that might have come through for people. I love hearing stories and people tell me and say, oh my gosh, this is so true for me, and here's how it's been happening. But what I can tell you is that there has been a not only growing of intuition, but more confidence that, yes, this is your intuitive sensibilities helping you make sense of the unseen world and kind of translate it in a way that you can sort of receive in your conscious mind. So there has been not just a growth in that, but more trust in what is coming through for you and a little bit more confidence where more individuals are willing to say, okay, this must mean something. And I believe that these messages that I'm picking up on are leading somewhere. I know that they are, that they're real and I'm not just making it up. I think we're holding a lot more space now for spiritual experiences than we did in the past, where a lot of times mentally people just shut those down or feel like somebody might think I sort of did the air quotes thing with crazy, if I were to tell them this is happening. And I think there's just been a little bit more growth around that. And I always love seeing that and hearing that. Our intuition is one of our most valuable and probably underutilized aspects of self and gifts. And intuition does not mean that we know everything. It doesn't mean that we're meant to be like have premonitions and be precognizant and see it all coming. It doesn't mean that we can't make mistakes or have the wool pulled over our eyes or anything like that. But it does allow us to read the energy of situations better. It does empower us to say, hey, spirit, I'm really struggling with this. Give me a sign or give me confirmation that I'm moving in the right direction, or I really need guidance. So could you help bring helpful people or helpful information into my path to guide me in the right way? It empowers us to feel a lot more freedom in kind of working our spiritual connection and trusting our intuitive abilities and trusting ourselves and trusting that if we don't know something, we don't know what we don't know, and that's okay. And trusting our intuition that we will figure it out when the time is right. So again, intuition's not knowing everything, it's having access to being able to interpret energy and signs and synchronicities and dreams and sort of these emotional underpinnings in our sea of self, where we'll sometimes feel a sense of something and we might not have evidence, but we're feeling it. And it allows us to be better prepared. Intuition's a little bit like accessing the Akashic Records when I said it helps give us a map and helps us at least know what we might be stepping into. The other thing that this year very likely brought for a lot of people is some form of metamorphosis and intense personal transformation. And we talked about that a little bit at the beginning when I said part of how the light was evolving. It was us, and it's our own journey and our own understanding of self. But there are so many times when I went into the records this year to bring through the monthly message for Akashic Magic, and the theme would be something having to do with like personal transformation, metamorphosis, like a huge shift in point of view, going through some sort of change. Collectively, we all moved into a new cycle back in sort of June into July, and that was reflected in the astrology at the time and the node shifting into new signs astrologically. And the records at the time in July said it almost feels like you're stepping into a brand new year right now, even though it's still in the middle of 2023. So there's been a lot of information coming through about being in this new cycle. And I very much feel a sense of that continuing as we move into 2024. But stepping into a new cycle always kind of gives us this 10 energy. And 10 energy is this energy of coming to completion with one thing, coming to sort of a finish or a sense of I came full circle. And we are wrapping stuff up. At the same time, we're actively sowing the seeds for something new. And one of the biggest misconceptions that we tend to have when we move into a new cycle is, or press refresh on something, do a big reboot or glow up for our life. We sometimes mistakenly think that it's all going to be different now, and we just left it all behind. And now we're in this new, fresh, brand new energy, and it's all going to feel different. And then stuff that was past stuff that we thought we left behind all of a sudden comes into our present. And we think, well, I thought I was done with that. This is a new cycle. Why am I still seeing this reoccurring theme or pattern? Or I cut this relationship out and it's back. What is going on with that? And it's never this linear thing where we just get to like leave it all behind. Energetically, wherever we go, there we are. We can move to an entirely new location, and it's going to be new and different. And for a while, probably feel like wildly like some Alice in Wonderland experience where we are having to reorient ourselves all together again. But over time, if we stay anywhere long enough, I think even if we move around a lot, we begin to see these reoccurring themes in our life. And we start to see that there are certain things that follow us where we go, that wherever we go, there we are. And the themes that we're working with don't just disappear because we made some big change. Now, sometimes we wrap them up, sometimes we learn a lesson and release them, but it's not uncommon for echoes of it to pop back. And we are always afforded the opportunity to re-engage with that old theme or old relationship from a new perspective and apply the wisdom that we have now learned to that older thing. So sometimes we're being given an opportunity to really test out all the new skills and strengths and boundaries and wisdoms that we've learned. And instead of thinking about why am I back in this same old thing again, we might think about it more like a upward spiral where we've come back around, but we're looking at it from a higher vantage point. And we've already learned some lessons. Now's a chance to practice them. And maybe we even learn some new things. And it's really common when we are ending something that there's residual and it will kind of just keep popping back in our sphere for a while until it's totally wrapped up or done. And at the same time, of course, we're sort of sowing these seeds for a new beginning. And so that's really how we can understand the idea of a new cycle. There is a lot of fresh, bright energy for change. And whenever a new cycle is starting, that is a great time to do the vision board thing, to plant the seeds for manifestation, all of that good stuff. But it's also helpful to think about all cycles as cyclical and again, spiraling, or maybe they're moving forward, but they're still moving in a circular motion. And we kind of circle back around to old stuff because we are transforming and completing and letting go of things even as we're creating them. So before we talk about the new cycle of 2024 and what the records have called the year 2024, let's just check in on where we're at in December. December, according to the records, is really a month of just rest and reflection and celebration. And I love the Akashic message for December so much because it was total permission to take a break for a while. We were told by the records that, like, whatever work that you needed to do in 23, it's probably done. Like, you've done a lot of the self work, you've done a lot of the heavy lifting, you've done a lot of the shifting and changing. And this was really a month of rejuvenation and just taking time for self care and whatever kind of connection you might choose or not choose during the holiday season. And the records really spoke to this idea that, yeah, stuff is coming in 2024. And that wasn't said in a scary way. It was just like, there's a lot of energy coming your way. So, like, take a breath, take some time to receive, take some time to reflect, take some time just to acknowledge how far you've come. And I always feel that December is really a beautiful month for taking inventory. It can be a really busy month for some people because of the holidays, especially if you have a lot of members in your family and you're bopping around from place to place to place. So, kind of work with wherever you're at in your life, depending on how much space you have. But I really encourage everyone to carve out a little bit of time before you move into January to just reflect on how did this year, like how did things show up for you? Where are you at? Just do a little bit of a check-in. Does anything feel incomplete right now? Like, what are the ongoing themes in your life? What did you wrap up? Was there something that you moved into the new year in 2023 and it was still sort of a story that was being spun out then? And it's been complete now and you've kind of wrapped that up. And if you don't have time to do this before, January, I think this episode is being released just a few days before the new year. You can do this work in January. I always feel like January is a transition month anyways, that even though we're in the energy of the new year, it's also kind of like a practice run. And I like to think that Lunar New Year usually is sometime around the third week to January to sometime in February based on the Lunar New Year calendar. And so sometimes I'm like, well, January is like this in-between time between the Gregorian New Year calendar and the Lunar New Year calendar. And so it's this month of being in that 10 energy of still wrapping up what we just completed and also immersing ourselves and getting used to this new beginning. So you can do this work in January if you can't get to it in December. No big deal. Self-work's always available to us at any time. But it is a nice time to take inventory right now and to take stock and just to come to terms. And something that the record said is that if we can just find a way to make peace with exactly where we're at, wherever you're at on your journey, whether like you did the thing this year and accomplished it and you're leaving the year feeling like, wow, like I met all my goals, like, yay, I am a rock star. Or whether you're like, wow, I didn't do the thing at all. And life spiraled sideways and I ended up having all this other stuff hit and my year just didn't look at all like I wanted it to. Or maybe you're somewhere in between. Wherever you're at, the guidance from the records is find a way just to make peace with it. Can you just accept that what's happened is what's happened? You haven't done anything wrong. You haven't done anything to turn your life sideways or to get off track. Most people who are really trying to show up and listen to their hearts and like follow their authenticity and journey the best they know how, we are still working under this umbrella of all these other cycles. We're working in the relationships in our life. We're working in these Mother Earth cycles, planetary cycles. We're working with cycles according to economic and political and social systems. And all of that impacts our ability to manifest, to create, how we go about creating and manifesting, how we go about accomplishing our goals. And so I just felt a lot of forgiveness from the records and just sort of coming to terms and finding a way to be at peace with wherever we're at instead of beating ourselves up for not being further along or having things not look differently by now, just finding grace for that. And it felt like if we could do that, it's going to clear a lot of energy as we step into the new year and really kind of keep us from falling in that trap of getting in the way of ourselves, right? And one of the ways that we get in the way of ourselves is we just waste all this time beating ourselves up for something that we think we should have done differently, or sometimes holding ourselves overly accountable as if we could have controlled our life circumstances better and should have seen something coming, or we second guess, well, if I had just done this, then maybe there would have been a different outcome. It's kind of like that bargaining stage of the grief process. If we've had a loss or had something and it just didn't quite pan out, we'll sit there and bargain. Well, I should have done this and I should have done this. And there is a small bit of utility in that I think it's always good for us to compassionately reflect on what could I have done differently. But ultimately, outside of some compassionate reflection where we're able to say, what can I learn from this for next time? Then it just gets internalized as negative self-talk and self-shaming and really holding ourselves back because we waste all this energy focusing on what didn't go right instead of being able to be present and focus on, well, this is where I'm at. How do I move forward as effectively as possible, kind of based on what's presenting itself in life to me? How can I move forward right now, engaged and aware and awake, and just working with the ingredients that do compose my life, even if they're not exactly what I thought they were going to be? Like, how can I make the best of that? So if we're able to sidestep that human tendency to kind of fall into like the pit of self-shame and self-blame, and instead move into a grace space and just find radical acceptance for what's come to pass, it's going to allow us to move forward with more openness and more ease. 2024, here we are. So the records called the year 2024 Anchoring the Light. And when I opened the records for the year 2024, I very much had a sense of a trilogy, almost as if the year 2023, 2024, and 2025 are like three parts to like some big trilogy or movie or something like that. I had just had a little comical moment in my mind. I was going to start naming like Star Wars or Indiana Jones. And then I was like, wait, none of those are trilogies anymore. They just kept adding to them. But in movies, there was sort of this original concept of a trilogy that had like, here's the first one, and it sort of lays the groundwork and sets the scene and sets it up. And here's the middle one, and it introduces character growth and introduces sort of a more developed theme. And then the third one is the resolution of here's sort of how it all turned out. And it's never that all years are connected to one another. My sense of the Akashic Records is that it is an ongoing story, and it's being written as we move forward and we write our lives and write our own Akashic Records and, sort of write into being what's happening in our own world. And the collective is writing into being what is happening. And these bigger spheres that we travel in. But there very much was a sense that this is a continuation of the story that began in 2023. And that was reflected in what they called this year the anchoring of the light. And if 2023 was the evolution of the light, and there was all this sense of like light moving and shifting, almost like it was traveling somewhere and rearranging things and relocating things, then 2024 feels like it's settling down and it's made it to where it needed to go. We are where we need to go. Energy is anchoring in and grounding us to where we are. And it feels like a very good year for manifestation. It feels like a year where if you've had a lot of energy tied up and you haven't been able to manifest or create whatever you have been looking to move forward on your path, this feels like a year where there's really good possibility around that. There's just a more grounded energy to it. And for anybody who is trying to create something that is going to be received by an audience, whether that is like writing a book or teaching something or something that might have to do with like your spiritual or career purpose, and you're hoping to share your vision with other people. My sense of it is that people weren't quite ready. And prior to this time, and they're ready now. There is a more receptivity to receive whatever message you've been given to share in whatever capacity you have to share it. And the way that this came through in the records was actually really delightful. It was kind of like if somebody was going to come out and give a speech or a presentation in front of like a huge audience, and the audience is kind of nervous. Like they've got all this nervous energy. They're really looking forward to it, but they're kind of nervous. And so they're sort of keyed up and wound up. And let's say our speaker's really nervous and they're kind of keyed up and wound up and freaked out. And, they're having sort of that stage anxiety that sometimes you might get of like, oh my gosh, I hope I don't like say something embarrassing or forget what I have to say or something like that. And then let's say that it's time for them to go on and they walk out to the mic and the podium. And as they're doing it, they like totally trip. They fall flat on their face. Super embarrassing. The audience is like, oh, everybody gasps. They get up, they're okay. They get to the mic and they just kind of look at everybody. And then everybody erupts into laughter all at once. And, maybe the speaker plays it off and makes a joke and says, well, now that I have gotten the part out of the way where I thought, gosh, what will happen if I've embarrassed myself? Now that I face that fear, like, let's get on with our talk. And like the speakers relaxed because like, hey, they already blew it, but it made them superhuman to the audience. And like in some ways, the audience and their laughter, they relax into it. And instead of sort of seeing this person as this expert and having this maybe unrealistic expectation of what they're going to say, everybody just relaxes some. And now they're present. And they just bonded through laughing and they're connected and they're just having this moment of here's the speaker who just happens to hold information that they're there to share with the audience. And they're just humans. Everybody's human and they're just there to receive it. And there is just a breath that has been taking place. And so the talk goes so much more beautifully than could have been imagined. And the audience receives it because they are in such a good, relaxed space. That is what it feels like in 2024. We've already tripped. We already faced the fear or whatever it was. Everybody's had a good laugh. And now, whoever is meant to receive whatever it is that we're energetically trying to create or put out there, they're so much more ready to receive it now. And that felt really positive to me. The other thing that came through for 2024 was the word hope. And it was just this idea in the records. This wasn't well developed, but I just had, some information come through that there was a lot of hopelessness in the world this last year, and that there are some things this year that are really going to help reignite the hope in our hearts. And there was a quality of hopefulness about this year, and felt like hope and the concept of hope might be a little less fragile and a little bit more easy to sink into and to grasp. We never want to lose hope. We always want to be able to bring ourselves back to a place of that. It's hard when hope feels fragile. But I had a sense of kind of optimism and hopefulness and just encouragement from the records to never give up hope, no matter how hopeless something looks in humanity, to never give that up. Our small acts of hope are needed at this time. And small acts of hope can be saying a little prayer, doing a little circle with friends where maybe you got together to do like a little moon ceremony, and you just take 30 seconds. You take a couple minutes at the end of that when you are having a meditation time, and you turn your hearts towards, pick something going on in the world right now that really could use some hope, could use angel wishes, that there are beings of light on the ground helping people who are kind of stuck and trapped in war zones, who are stuck or trapped in some sort of natural disaster zone, the things that feel stuck. We send our love to those. That's an act of hope. Donating, acts of kindness, acts of light, they're acts of hope. And so there was this exhortation from the records to always remember that all those acts of hope matter, and they add up to more hopefulness. Hope begets hope, kind of like love begets love. Higher frequency energies have a tendency to multiply. Joy increases joy. There is an abundance of these things. And if we can plant a little seed of it and grab onto a little seed of it in our life, it allows it to kind of grow forward and pay itself forward in our lives. And that allows us to pay it forward into other people's life. So these are exponential energies when we're talking about things like hope and joy and goodness and kindness and love and energies that really comprise many of our spiritual values. They continue to multiply and to give themselves away, so to speak. So we have good things to look forward to. And as we move into 2024, I will definitely do some more Akashic roundups on the podcast and kind of do some energy updates, and try and do them quarterly and just kind of reorient us to, well, here's where we're at now, so we can expect more grounded energy coming our way. And I very much do feel January is a little bit like a trial month, like we're just getting the lay of the land. We might have a lot of positive, like, yay, it's the new year. Like, let's go do all the things all at once. So don't be hard on yourself. Like, be patient with your process. If you're like, I'm going to do everything, and then you're like, I don't know what everything is. And what's the first step again? And where am I going? It's okay. We have a whole new year in front of us, plenty of time. Like, there's time is not a limited quality. There's plenty of time to do all the things that you came here to do. You will have all the time you need. So be patient in January. There's bright, optimistic energy, but just allow for the fact that it's a pilot month of the entire year. So we're going to take a while to work some kinks out and get the lay of the land. All right. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode of Your Heart Magic. And Happy New Year to everybody. We are almost there. Happy 2024, whether you're catching this on the side of 2023 or we're already into the new year. I am very excited to bring through lots of new podcasts coming in the new year. And we will be kicking off 2024 with Archetypes of the Tarot episode and moving on to the Wheel of Fortune, which is associated with the number 10. And as we talked about in today's episode, 10 is a number of endings and beginnings, and the wheel, the archetype of that, is representative of that. So we will be talking more about those ideas next week on the Your Heart Magic podcast. Until then, be well, be love, be you, and be magic.
You've been listening to Your Heart Magic with Dr. BethAnne Kapansky-Wright. Tune in next week for a new episode to support and empower your light.